this has been a big movement all over the last decades to ask for businesses to do more. We're seeing so much growth mindset that also takes into consideration the planet and people. And I have a lot of faith in newer generations that are now setting up businesses, that are joining boards, that are holding accountable what companies are doing.
This podcast is a product of Vive, where we unlock sustainable businesses. Produced by Amplitude Ventures, your partners in early stage venture building.
Hi, and welcome to Business as Unusual. I'm Sara Fossum, the founder of Vive, and for the past decade, I've been working and learning in sustainable business, trying to understand what it really looks like and what it could be. Along the way, I've had so many honest conversations with people across industries. We've talked about both the challenges and the opportunities of doing business differently. And I believe that too often sustainability is seen as compliance and something that you have to do. But when it's approached the right way, it can actually reduce risks, drive efficiency, and open up new and better ways of creating value, not only socially and environmentally, but also economically. And that's what the podcast is about, rethinking business for the long run. We will hear from people with different perspectives who are navigating the shift and making change happen. And today I am excited to have Lorena Muñoz joining us. And I was lucky enough to visit Lorena at Bright Products, where she works, and learn more about this very inspiring company. And I'm looking forward to dive deeper into what you're doing and your experience. But first of all, welcome, Lorena.
Hi, Zara. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I was so inspired to meet you and to meet Bright Products, whom you work for, earlier this year, where I came to visit you. And just to talk a bit about Bright Products, so the company was designed to deliver energy across humanitarian settings. And you have been focused on embedding human rights and sustainability principles into the core of the company. And that, I think, was very evident when I saw how you worked and learned more about your company. So why don't you just tell us a bit about how you've gone about that and more about Bright Products in general?
Yeah, thank you. It was really great to have you over, and it's always really nice to share a little bit more of what we do. So yeah, we design and manufacture the solar lamps that are distributed in humanitarian settings like refugee or displacement settings, places where there's humanitarian crisis going on. And actually, my background is in human rights, and then I specialized in business and human rights. And prior to Bright, I had never worked with the private sector. It had been very, very focused on what I was doing, and I was trying to make businesses better, but from the outside. And so when I learned about this role in Bright, I got really excited. And something that became really apparent from the beginning when I started working was that it was already happening. Like a lot of the things were considered already. So, for example, um, just because we make or we work with solar energy, it doesn't mean that we're sustainable by default, right? So that was something that was already very embedded in the way that the R&D or the research and development team was working with. And obviously, there was also like a very interesting combination of my colleagues, in which you wouldn't only have like engineers or product designers. You had actually people that had a humanitarian background or had work in the field, so they could bring in also that experience. And you kind of have to when you're working with people that are extremely vulnerable, when you're working with humanitarian organizations, you kind of have to consider all of that from the beginning. What was really fun for me was to find out that they were already doing a lot of these things,
Yeah.
but we were not great at showing them,
Yeah.
which was almost a luxury problem. because it's the opposite of what we see in a lot of companies, right? Like there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of reports, that there's a lot of outward communications, but the internal, how do we apply all of this in practice,
Yeah.
is lacking. So the challenge for me has been, how do we communicate what we're doing in frameworks that people understand,
Yeah.
um, and how we translate that work that is already happening, but people don't call it ESG,
Mm.
they don't call it sustainability, they don't call it human rights. So that's been a very interesting problem to work with.
Normally, it's the other way around.
Yes. Yes, as they say, it's a luxury problem to have. I always like to brag a little bit that we're only 9 people now. This is like we just hired someone else. We're 9, we're growing.
Yeah.
But the company has been in place for like over 12 years.
Yeah.
So we're not a startup. We're a very consolidated company. But I think there's been a real focus on building a very strong team that shares the same values. And also, I think there's a lot of strength in having very different profiles, but sharing the same goal. So we have a really excellent team of product designers, then the people that we work with partnerships or sales. We have very different backgrounds that you would not find on a average company.
Mm.
So I have a background in business and human rights. One of my colleagues has a background on sales.
Mm.
So it's very diverse across the board.
Yeah.
And I think investing in that diversity also in our cultural or like country backgrounds.
Mm.
Like we have people from all over. I have one colleague from Sudan, have one colleague from Mexico, I'm from Spain. So I think we're a really good case of finding the right people, diversifying your team and building on each other's strengths,
Mm.
and then working towards that same goal. So I think that's been a really positive also experience for me.
Yeah. And I love to hear these cases. Diversity is about um, seeing the value of having different backgrounds, different perspectives, and using that to enhance and optimize and you know contribute to bringing more value. And yeah, I think a lot of companies have a lot to learn when it comes to that.
It's really an advantage. I cannot even imagine doing this in a different way,
Yeah.
especially when you're working internationally or when your products are reaching people all over the world.
Mm.
The insight that it brings you in terms of like the end users or the organizations you're working with, the languages that we do our user manuals in-house
Yeah.
because we have someone that speaks Arabic, someone that speaks French, we speak Spanish. So we don't have to outsource a lot of things
Yeah.
because there's a lot of competency already built in-house because there's been a big emphasis on building that international oriented team.
Yeah. That's amazing. And you work with sustainability in Bright Products, and also you have a background from human rights, and you're also in charge of like the ESG reporting and all the sustainability related work that you do, which basically is embedded into everything. And what I think is very interesting to talk about is how a lot of companies struggle with the compliance focus. So when they start working with sustainability, it's often driven by compliance and something you have to do. Whereas I think you have an excellent case of where, okay, you get all of these requirements, but you're actually able to use it to create value and to unlock opportunities. So can you tell a bit about your experience in that and leading that work in the company?
Yeah. I think that's also really interesting because again, based on our size, we don't really have to.
Mm.
Like we're not doing this because we have to. It's more because we're seeing this as definitely something that we want to do,
Yeah.
but also it is a big competitive advantage in my experience.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think we always talk about this very strong compliance, like sandwich list approach,
Mm.
and the fear of like perhaps getting a fine or just it's approach from a place of fear instead of a place from opportunity. And I think for me, there's been perhaps like three good things that if there's a lot, but if I have to like summarize it, I think it's helped us to build a lot of trust with our stakeholders,
Yeah.
particularly in the environment in which we work. Trust is essential, but that works for any business, right? You
Mm.
need to build trust with your shareholders, with any stakeholders, with society. Um, and when you pay attention to your supply chain, when you gather information about who is at every stage of this supply chain and value chain, and are able to put that information forward in a transparent way. You don't have to be perfect.
Mm.
I think a lot of companies fear that they have to be perfect, and that's very difficult. You just have to show that you're trying. Just be transparent. Show this, look, this is what we're doing great, but also we're struggling here. And there's a lot of companies that might be struggling in the same aspect.
Definitely.
So I think there's a lot of power in like harnessing that and being transparent, and that helps also build trust
Mm.
with all your stakeholders. Um, then something that I've particularly enjoyed a lot as well is that working a lot closer with like ESG reporting or doing my like human rights due diligence exercise.
Mm.
It's built also like a lot of supplier engagement, and I think that's such a powerful strength because get to know your supplier, get to know your sub suppliers.
Mm.
And this is not going to happen overnight, but it's such a good investment
Yeah.
because when the difficult times come, and there's so many things in the last years that we've seen the pandemic, we've seen like budget and cuts all over like the humanitarian world. Having a trust-based and close relationship with your supplier is going to allow you flexibility, is going to increase the resilience of your supply chain, is going to allow you to innovate in the good times, and that's one really big strength that we have. And in my experience, our main like manufacturer and like our supplier, they've jumped in when we've been working on sustainability, when we've been asking them for information. They've actually been very happy to work with us. So just try out.
Yeah.
That was a really big surprise. And the last point that I would say is that working with this, don't see it only as a report, but like as gaining more expertise in your product and your company.
Mm.
Like at the end of the day, you should be an expert in your own product. Like no one knows your product or your company better than you.
Mm.
And doing this exercise gives you such a expansive knowledge of your own product, how it positions in the world, how your product is used, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the gaps. It allows you to innovate.
Yeah.
Like there's so much. I mean, again, I did human rights, but originally I did international relations. So I always think in this very international terms, and I always see like our little product plays in the really big scheme of things. And a great way to do that is through ESG reporting, human rights due diligence, and it becomes a lot more than just one product and one company. It's an ecosystem that it's built around.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's so inspirational to see because I've I've experienced myself also, and I've seen in so many companies how regulations such as Transparency Act or Åpenhetsloven in Norway, how it's and I remember I was so impressed when I saw your work there, and obviously with your background, it's something that you're an expert in. Um, but I just remember the methodology around it and how complex it is if you kind of start from scratch. Um, but to see how and I think kind of the purpose of the regulation obviously is to do what you guys are doing, but it's a long way to get there. Um, and to see the value that it actually has when you're able to work well with your suppliers and actually do what the purpose of the regulation is. Um, that is, I hope that other companies can see these examples and see how this is actually something that creates value.
I really hope that other companies as well in investing as well like internal expertise. It's not like there's a lot of us that are like especially in Norway that are that have the same background that I do. I think perhaps when I started training on human rights due diligence, I think Openhetsloven or the Transparency Act was being discussed. But at that time, I don't think there were a lot of like experts or people that specialized on this.
Mm.
And I think one of the things that made me a little bit sad when this was adopted, and in the same way that we see with like sustainability regulations, is that experts grew out, overnight.
Yeah.
So we saw a lot of like marketing or like communications or CFOs being put in charge of doing this report and then completely overwhelmed overnight
Yeah.
because they had to like, oh my God, human rights, what is this? What forced labor? No, it's way beyond that. And like there was so much chaos and confusion. But I think since that time, there's been a lot of like expertise built in.
Mm.
And in the same way, I encourage a lot of like human rights experts to also dive into this field because I think it's a really beautiful one and there's a lot of potential for impact. But also, I encourage companies to seek out that expertise. Like, I'm not a profile that would be usually hired in a private company, but we can also bring in a lot of nuance and knowledge. So it's good for companies to take risks sometimes and hire profiles that are outside, like, BI box, for example.
And you also talk about the importance of working with stakeholders. Um, and your work has shown that you work very engaged with your stakeholders and also in affected communities such as Uganda and Bangladesh. And what have you learned from, you know, co-creating solutions with the local stakeholders, and how has that affected both in terms of the impact that you're able to give, but also the business in itself?
Yeah. I think that's such an important question. I mean, personally for me, obviously, is because it's morally right, it's what you have to.
Yeah.
But obviously, there's also a very strong business case. And for a really long time, and I think this still happens, um, a lot of decisions are made in boards, are made in Geneva, they're made in New York. And then the people, especially in the humanitarian sector, are so far away from that reality.
Yeah.
And I experienced that before working also for the nonprofits. I never managed to do a lot of field work or have direct contact with the stakeholders I was involved. And this is one of the things that I really like, that
Mm.
I'm able to actually engage with the people that are going to be using our products
Yeah.
and learn from them what they need, and not me from Oslo telling them, oh, you actually need this
Yeah.
in Uganda or Bangladesh.
Yeah.
So um, I think like a couple of examples of how we have implemented that. Um, I think about a couple of years ago, me and the head of research and development, we went to spend a couple of weeks doing some field work in Mozambique, in a village completely off grid.
Yeah.
That was really exciting. And we usually gather feedback on like how people are using it. We ask them to show us how they're using our products. And one of the things that we observed was that a lot of mothers would have the lowest setting of our products turn on during the night so the kids could sleep.
Yeah.
And you don't think about this but kids are kids everywhere in the world. Kids have nightmares. Kids don't sleep at night. Moms have to, or dads have to go back and forth. And it had improved their quality of sleep at night, and the kids were feeling safer.
Yeah.
So we brought this back, and then we decreased the lumen or light intensity because one, it will increase the battery. Two, it will make the product more durable. And then we're tackling this particular cases scenario. Now, this is also a bit of a fight because when you work with technical specifications from humanitarian organizations, sometimes they will not include all of these cases and they want more lumen. They want more light. The more light, the better. So you also have to argue a little bit with them on why this technical specification is not covering for a lot of like case use in the field.
Mm.
Another thing we also notice a lot is that you also have to take into consideration the ecosystem or the culture and behavior of where the lamps are used. I never thought in my life I would be thinking so much about lamps and everything around them.
Yeah.
But for example, in a lot of the displaced and settlements, there's an informal economy, right? Where people would trade or sell and buy other products from scrap dealers, for example. So the cable on our solar panels a lot of times would be cut, and this renders the solar panel completely unusable because there's no cable. But people will be cutting it and selling it for the copper inside. Um, and then in the technical specifications that we had to apply when we were designing our products for some humanitarian organizations, they wanted longer cables.
Yeah.
And then it was a very few interesting years of discussing with them. Actually, no, you don't really need longer cables. Like technically, it doesn't make sense because there's this thing called cable loss that I will not get into.
Yeah.
But also, we've seen that the longer the cable, then you're going to be encouraging people to like cut and sell, and the product will be not usable for such a long time.
Yeah.
And also, when we did our life cycle assessment of the materials, cables have a high CO2 footprint.
Mm.
So the more cable you have, like, higher the footprint.
Yeah.
So this is just watching and talking with people and how they use the products. He has so much insights
Mm.
about how it is actually working in reality. And you don't get this in a lab, you don't get this in an office. And so it gives you a lot of room to like innovate. It gives you a lot of room to improve your products. Like from our repair project, we've learned what are the weaker parts of our product that might make it like not last that long. So we have introduced directly like those changes in the product. So it gives you versatility. It makes you more resilient. It makes a better product. It makes a better company.
Mm.
Instead of just like throwing money at a product that no one will adopt. No one. It's. I think this goes beyond market research where you just have like a desktop research or papers. Just it's so vital to actually speak with the people that are using your products.
No, absolutely. And I think it's really good and interesting to hear the specific cases and kind of see um, what does this mean in practice and what you've
Mm.
experienced. And yeah, it's really interesting. But I can also imagine that you encounter challenges and there are trade-offs and tough realities also when it comes to, for example, resource constraints, and also in navigating and humanitarian supply chains. Um, can you talk a bit about like what have you experienced any challenges and how have you gone about facing those, and also have you been able to unlock new opportunities that have evolved from facing the challenges?
Yeah, I think humanitarian supply chains are not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
They require a lot of patience. Or humanitarian organizations move at a very slow pace, which is something that the private sector is not used to, right? We have OKRs, KPIs, we have all of these things that we need to match and meet every quarter, and you have a board and you have um and you want results now, but humanitarian organizations don't work that way. And last mile logistics is also a big challenge.
Yeah.
So I would say like definitely patience is the key trait that we all need to have in
Yeah.
here. And there's better days and there's worse days. And especially this year where we've seen so many budget cuts for humanitarian organizations. Um, I think one of the things we have learned based on this challenge is that it's very cyclical. Obviously, this year has been a really uh, bad year for the humanitarian sector. We've seen so many colleagues, people that we've worked with, organizations shutting down after the USAID um, cuts or like shut down.
Yeah.
Um, but this was a trend that we had seen from coming like for the last 2 years. So one of the things that we have been trying to put in place is how to make our, particularly after COVID, how to make our own supply chain and our work more resilient. So again, one of the things that we've learned how to do a lot better is to work with our suppliers. our strategies around stock and warehousing. When do we have products ready? How to like think a bit more strategically about all of these things. Um, I think it's more than ever a really good moment to like show that trust and perhaps flexibility. We've had to learn to be a lot more flexible with of some of the organizations we work with, but it has also pushed us to think a little bit more outside of the box. So how do we innovate in our business model? We know we want to continue working in the line of work that we are, but that means we're going to have to reinvent ourselves a little bit.
Yeah.
So the type of stakeholders that we work with might need to change a little bit in terms of like who are the people that are like funding our lamps. I think companies hopefully have a lot of room to play and becoming a lead, um, pushing for change in these times. I'm a big advocate of I think companies can do a lot of bad things, but companies can also do really good things. We can move faster. We have resources. We have a lot of chances to reach in places where others can't and influence. And I think now is the time for us to step up. And I think there's many schools of thought here, but I'm really hoping that we all find new ways to cooperate. Also, like humanitarian organizations will also need to find new partnerships. And we as corporate will have to find there's a lot of possibilities for us in the world that is being shaped right now. And I think it's a great time to look internally and rethink, okay, there's a lot of challenges. Can we do well while doing good? And I think that's such a yeah, leading thought in everything that I've been trying to do
Yeah.
with my career, because I truly think we can.
Yeah.
But there's a lot in mindset, and right now in these challenging times is where you can show that.
Definitely. Yeah, it's impressive the work that you do and so important. And yeah, I think also in general to um see these cases where, all impact and sustainability and what you say, like regeneration and business all kind of meet and intersect. And what does that look like? And what is success in that matter? And I think, yeah, Bright Products is such a good example of that.
Yeah. I think you cannot avoid it,
Mm.
right? I think in the world we're living right now, we're interacting with this
Mm.
every day.
Mm.
Like we all see the news. We've all at an individual level experienced the weather changing. Like I mean, maybe not so much in Norway, but we had like the floods last year in Spain. It's just like you cannot be blind to that reality anymore. Um, and I think it's time to like pull resources from everyone. And this has been a big movement all over the last decades to ask for businesses to do more.
Yeah.
And again, I think like perhaps a lot of people and other generations might not agree. Like, companies' role is to do profit,
Mm.
and the shareholders are the main focus. But we're seeing so many other business models. We're seeing so much growth mindset that also takes into consideration the planet and people. And I have a lot of faith in newer generations that are now
Mm.
setting up businesses, that are joining boards, that are holding accountable
Mm.
what companies are doing. And I think even if we see a lot of like regulatory backlash, for example, in with the entire European sustainability package or the Green Deal, I think the it on the coffee chats or the chats over coffee, it doesn't feel like we're truly on a full-on backlash because we're still here.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of us asking for that change and working for that change even before that regulatory package was being discussed. So I think there's a lot of change happening in the practice. A little bit perhaps like what I was saying about brides. there's a lot of things that are happening, and now they just have to find a way in a framework, right? But it doesn't mean that they're not happening.
Mm.
Where I'm a skeptical optimist, I would say. I have a lot of skepticism, but I also have a lot of optimism
Yeah.
that we can make some impact also as putting our heads and resources together.
Mm, definitely. Thank you so much for very insightful discussion and for sharing all of your insight and experience with the Bright products. I think there's so many cases and so many examples and just the tips that you've shown and shared that can help other companies also to see what the value is and how to go about it. And I do have one last question for you. Ha- So I always like to ask the people joining the podcast if they have any recommendations when it comes to book or research or just reading material, um, where to inspire or to share something that you think is important for people to get into, and maybe then especially in terms of the intersection between human rights and sustainability
Mm.
business.
I would say I have a few very nerdy recommendations and very basic for anyone that is curious about business and human rights
Yeah.
as a field. Because I also, when I say that I work within business and human rights, people don't really understand what it is. They sometimes ask me if that's greenwashing, and I'm like, no, 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 that's not. No, I'm trying to embed human rights in businesses, not like don't. So I dig a little bit back on my resources, and then I can recommend regulating corporate human rights violations from Surya Deva. He is a great expert in the field of business and human rights. And then Just Business from John Ruggie, who is the creator of the UN Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights.
Wow.
It's really interesting because they both have very different perceptions. I'm more on team Deva, but you can see the contrast on what role should business have, if it should be mandatory for companies to have some human rights obligations versus just respect human rights. And then I think if you don't want to go on the book and a bit more academic road, the Business and Human Rights Resource Center, it's a really good tool for people to stay updated
Hmm.
on a lot of trends. They also have really good essays, thought pieces, posts, news, updates on like regulatory changes, but also cases that are changing the landscape or the legal landscape on businesses' obligations or responsibilities toward human rights. So it's a really great resource. Um, and I think the last recommendation I would have a little bit less academic, and probably it's I don't know if it's been recommended before, but it's Red Cobalt from Siddharth Kara, where it researches a little bit the cobalt mining in Congo.
Yeah.
That it's ironically fueling a lot of green transition energies, especially IV or like electric vehicles,
Yeah.
while committing gross violations of human rights.
Yeah.
So it's a really good book to think about this intersection of how are we funding
Mm.
or what is the foundation which we're building this green transition
Yeah.
and fighting climate change in a really horrible way.
Wow.
What are the trade-offs? How do we do it? How do we ensure a just transition? And obviously corporations are at the core of how we're doing this. So if you want like the perfect like triple Venn diagram, that's a really good book to think about.
Well, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to look into that.
Yep.
But thank you so much, Lorena, for joining the podcast and sharing all of your insight. And we'll talk again soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on doing this podcast. I think it's really worth having all of these conversations.
You see you soon.
See you.